So it's a real honor for Energy Evaluation Europe to be hosting the Kathleen Gaffney Prize. Kathleen was a friend, colleague, mentor to many of us, and a real stalwart of this community, having been involved since an energy evaluation community in Europe was first thought of in 2009. So it's fantastic that we've got this award, and it's also fantastic that we've got Charlie Homo, Kathleen's husband, here, and Brian Motherway, Head of Energy Efficiency at the IEA, to help us present it. So first of all, I'm going to ask Brian to say a few words, and then Charlie will present the awards.
Thank you, Charles, and good evening, everybody. Our dear friend and colleague Kathleen passed away, and we miss her terribly. And I still find it difficult to say that sentence out loud. But she left such a legacy for all of us who've known and worked with her. And I think just what we've heard from Gaël reminds us of the purposefulness of the work she did over many years and decades in terms of the impact she had on energy efficiency and clean energy in many parts of the world. But more than that, she left a legacy of being an exemplar friend and colleague and mentor to many people who had the privilege of knowing her and working with her in many capacities over the decades. And so when we lost her, many friends and colleagues came together and discussed how we could commemorate and sustain her memory. And I think I wasn't one of the leaders of that, so I want to thank Charlie and Mel and many colleagues here who really did drive that initiative, who thought about how we could commemorate Kathleen this year and for the years to come. And I think they landed on exactly the right point, because Kathleen stood out for her ability to work with younger colleagues and help them develop their careers, help them develop their thinking, work with them in a friendly way. She was more sociable than me and Mel put together. You'll forgive me, Mel, if I say that. Among the colleagues, we still haven't quite filled the gap in terms of her ability to bring the team together, bring the young colleagues together, and really help them achieve the most and get the most from their work as well as from their lives more generally. So a number of former colleagues, friends, former employers came together and raised a fund of what is now nearly 17,000 euros. And I want to thank everybody who's contributed to that, as well as those who organized it. And this is being put to the use of helping young researchers engage, do their work, present their work in environments like this. And I think it's a really very, very fitting tribute, and I want to thank everybody. It's a delight then to be here for the first award of these prizes, and I really want to thank everybody who entered the awards, as well as congratulate in advance those who are about to be announced as winners. It's a particular privilege then to say that we're joined by Charlie, Kathleen's husband, who's been a great friend to all of us, and he was kind enough to lend us Kathleen during the daytime when we worked with her, and we've been delighted to stay as friends since then. And Charlie, I do hope you feel the love and warmth towards Kathleen that continues among all her friends and colleagues. So please join me in welcoming Charlie Homan. Charlie.
Hello. So I'm going to keep this short because I'm not really used to this. I'm working, yeah, and I don't want to get too emotional, and I don't really want to hear a nice voice telling me to get to the point, which Kathleen would tell me all the time. So Kathleen, from what I hear and from what I know, had a unique ability to create a work environment where, with hard work, inclusive of everyone, and super fun, apparently. Most of all, she encouraged young people to take up careers in energy efficiency and was generous with her time to support and coach them. She would have been really pleased to see everybody today, students and young evaluators, attend this event. So I can announce that 3 papers were shortlisted for this prize, and it was a tough decision to make, of course, but eventually the panel decided on 1 winner and 2 runners-up, who we'll welcome to the stage to present a short summary of their work in a moment. So without further ado, we'll now proceed with the presentation of the certificates to the 3 finalists. I don't know where the certificates are. Okay, great. And first, we're going to welcome the two runners-up on stage, starting with Mr. Douw Truchen, researcher at the Netherlands Organization for Applied Scientific Research. Great. You can stand. I'm going to shake your hand.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations. And now we welcome on stage Ms. Charlotte Verhagen, academic assistant and PhD candidate from the University of Antwerp. Congratulations. And last but not least, the winner of this year's Kathleen Gaffney Prize is, it's written suspense, so I'll wait a second, Ms. Iska Brunsema, researcher at the Fraunhofer Institute for Systems and Innovation Research, ISI. Congratulations. Congratulations. That's all I have. Sorry. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Charlie, and thank you, Brian. So we just thought it'd be really nice if each of the three winners could give us a little potted summary of their work, so because we won't all have been in the sessions where they've been presenting. So I guess we should ask Iska to go first as the victorious one. Do you want me to? Yeah. Do you want some stuff?
I think it'll work.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm trying. Yes, thank you so much. I'm glad I was warned, because if not, I would have been speechless, as I was when I first heard it. I did not know Kathleen, but my co-author told me a little bit about her and her influence in the energy evaluation realm, I could say, here in Europe. And this co-author of mine is important to mention because, of course, this is not my work alone, but I think all the evaluation work that we see here at the moment is the result of the past 10, 15 years and everything, all the input of the different researchers that have put their ideas into everything. And in the paper I presented here this morning, I talked about transparency in energy evaluation or policy evaluation overall, with a focus on GHG emissions and energy efficiency policies. And what we found was that there are different aspects that need to be very carefully considered. One of them being transparency, very transparently communicating the data we use, the questions we actually ask, also the uncertainties we face, the methodological aspects that we need to consider. And considering the uncertainties in evaluations, there are so many difficulties when trying to consider things that can't be quantified, where we don't have data, which is, I think, a problem we all know very well. And whenever we are faced with these difficulties, we found that it needs at least to be considered qualitatively or talked about, written about in our evaluations, so that the people who need those evaluations as a basis for decision making know where we are coming from, where our results are coming from. and we did an evaluation of a funding program for energy efficiency in industry in Germany, and found that our methodological approach of using our methodological approach structurally, worked very well, but also posed in reality the difficulty that, for example, effect adjustments for a net impact of a measure can be hard to assess, because not all effects, such as rebound effects or spillover effects, are always easy to assess, also due to data not being there, or because it's bound to behavior and people. So such a challenge, as well as not always knowing how a measure will actually look like in the end, always need to be considered, and as such, sometimes we're not able to give a final perfect result, but very confidently, at least, an assessment of what the impact of a measure may be. Thank you.
Thank you for giving me this runners-up prize. I'm Charlotte Verhagen. I'm a PhD researcher from the University of Antwerp. And my research deals with future-proofing our high-energy performance buildings. High-energy performance buildings, with this I mean, for instance, nearly zero energy buildings, passive houses, positive energy buildings, and so on. And with future-proofing, well, I wasn't exactly sure what I meant by this, and that's why I wrote a paper about it, and this is the one I wrote for this conference. I've been investigating this topic, and I knew already that it was about securing the performance level of buildings, even though they have to operate in a context that is very volatile. It's dynamic, and we can't really predict all of it. That's what I was looking into, and I found that, well, many of us researchers are partially or completely neglecting these dynamics in the context. And I was thinking, is this really correct? Are we really making the right decisions without taking this volatility into account? And so my key finding I want to share with you already is that it did make a huge difference if we take into account uncertainties in the context in which these buildings operate. That's my first key finding, and my second key finding was that our assessments are currently very static and linear in nature, with which I mean static. We take averages, for instance, seasonal averages, in which the building operates. Think about only making a difference between winter and summer conditions, but not taking into account all of the maxima and minima. And with linear, I mean that we tend to make decisions in the year zero. So we make an investment decision in the year zero, and then we only consider maintenance and, for instance, also replacements after a while. But the decision is really taken in the beginning, in year zero. And apparently, this results in a decreased ability to future-proof our buildings. We should more look to dynamic and sequential analysis. Dynamic, with which I mean that we have to take into account all of the variabilities with the correct time steps. And sequential, I mean that we should really investigate for instance, the option of delayed decisions when the correct conditions are into place. Think, for instance, of the energy prices that are very good to make a certain investment, or maybe technology prices have changed, or maybe the energy performance of technology is better after 30 years from year zero. So these two things seem to be very important. And this also means that we have to increase the level of detail and the complexity of our analyses. And of course, I recognize that this is not possible for every one of us. So I think we should also look at how we can simplify the models, but really start from more in-depth models that we have currently. So the work is at our site, at the site of the researchers, and we cannot do this alone. So I'm very happy that sharing my insights gets recognized by the conference, for instance, and I really encourage all of you to keep on sharing and work together so we can avoid repeated work. So thank you, everyone.
All right, thanks very much. On behalf of the whole research team, I can say that I'm very honored to have received this award. Even though it comes as a great surprise, I just happened to have a speech with me, so that comes in quite conveniently. And I would like to seize this opportunity to, share a little bit of the research and also share a personal central takeaway from what we have done. So you can also form your opinion on whether you agree with this runner-up prize being awarded to us. So in the project, we asked what the role of stakeholders has been in the decision-making process or the negotiations of the Dutch Climate Agreement. And the Dutch Climate Agreement of 2019 forms the program for the Netherlands' decarbonization ambitions towards 2030 and 2050. And the process of discussing and negotiating the content of this climate agreement is characterized by explicit, extensive and close stakeholder involvement. So our question was, what exactly happened during the negotiations at the so-called climate tables? So which discussions took place, which technical options were discussed, which preferences eventually ended up in this agreement, and so on and so forth. Now, it's not my intention to, discuss all the highly interesting results here. I'm not going to bore you with that because we also don't have time, because there's drinks waiting for us and an energy transition to get done. But one finding that really impacts or has impacted me as a political scientist and my take on evaluation, I thought was worthwhile highlighting here. And that is what I found really relevant is that a big share of the negotiations or the scope of the negotiations was already determined firmly before the negotiations started. So there was a delineated range of technological options that was to be discussed at these climate tables, including solar and wind, green and blue hydrogen and CCS. And coincidentally, most of these technological options were quite convenient for the current business models of the current business and industry stakeholders. And just as a disclaimer, I put it a bit boldly here for the sake of this short speech, but in the report we're quite nuanced indeed. So where I'm going with this is that in the case of the Dutch Climate Agreement shows that the negotiation process is not the only process where interest struggles, lobbying, and power dynamics occur. Much has indeed been decided way before those negotiations started. So influencing the topics that are on the table is a very important endeavor. And this reminded me how much lobbying may actually look like elections in the way that Elmer Schatzsnyder described it eloquently in his 1960 page-turner, The Semi-Sovereign People. In elections, according to Schatzsnyder, the most important thing for a candidate to do is determine which topics are, or which topic is most important in this election campaign. And whether it's climate change or immigration issues or the war on drugs, make sure that it's the topic that you dominate. Because if your unique selling point is climate, and you have a lot of good ideas about that, but the main topic of the elections is the war on drugs, you don't stand a chance as a candidate. Now, similarly, for lobbying, it starts before the actual negotiations, by setting the scope and making sure that that fits your agenda. Because once the scope has been determined, it's really hard to add new interests to the discussion. So it's really about determining the menu of the negotiations, as it's impossible to order a dish that is not on the menu. So the takeaway for research and for us as researchers is to consider what phases of the policy process are relevant to look at. In any event, the case of the Dutch Climate Agreement has shown that the normal or the obvious phase of lobbying may not be the only phase in this story, and it may not even be the most important one to look at. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Thank you for everyone for staying and watching the prize. I just want to give a shameless plug to a session on Friday morning that is being moderated by Hebe, which is about how do we encourage and grow and recruit the evaluators of tomorrow. And I think some of you are sitting on that panel. So that's going to be a really interesting session. And those of us who have a responsibility to bring on the next generation should certainly attend that. Meanwhile, let's get off to some drinks. Thanks again to you three. Let's give them a last round of applause.